All right, Stefan, alcoholic. It's my honor and privilege to introduce our speaker. He helped me to work the fourth and fifth step honestly. For the first time, I was able to feel some peace. You also might know him as by receiving a quote of the day through text message. I know many of you get him. He's 37 years of sobriety from San Clemente, Irish Mike.
All right, Irish Mike, alcoholic. Think you guys hear me okay? Yeah, I'm also very tall. Yeah, thank you for having me. I got to thank the Primary Purpose Group and Stefan for inviting me again. And, Stockton's kind of become a home away from home for me. Last time I was here, you guys were so welcoming and so loving. And, it's interesting. It's like there. Does that work? Is that better? Yeah, the same. It's not so close, huh? Yeah, and again, it happened. When I came here, you guys were so welcoming, and the last time I was here was just one spiritual experience after another, and it's been kind of the same way. I went to the Primary Purpose Group for a couple of things, and I think the first person I met was Bob, and it was an immediate kindred spirit. I just knew that I needed to be a part of that man's life. I just knew it in my heart of hearts. And I got to hear some spiritual experiences from Patty and another guy, Joe, and we're talking about from the heart. I got to meet Terry and Jennifer, and I promised them a funny Catholic story. That's coming later. Had a great dinner just before we came here, and with a group of sober members. Allison, you inspire me, and Rena, you're just a bowl of joy. And Todd was there, and he was talking about being also a member of Crystal Methodist Anonymous, and I just said, I was born and raised Catholic, but then I became a Crystal Methodist, Yeah, and then had dinner last night, with one of my favorite people here, Alicia, and she's just, such a warm heart, and I got to hear Allison's story, or Alyssa's story of redemption. Anyways, where I'm going with this is that what I've discovered is that it's not how many breaths you take. It's how many moments it take your breath away. And if we're too self-absorbed and we're running around, we miss these moments. And when I was here last, Stefan said, there's someone that you need to meet. She wants to meet you. And he took me to the back of the room, and there was a woman with a cane named Heidi. And I remember the name, actually. And she struggled to get up. She was recovering from an accident. And with tears in her eyes, she said, I just want to thank you for sending out the morning reflection that you write and send out each day. And she goes, I was involved in an accident, and I couldn't get to meetings. And my only connection to recovery was that post that you sent every morning. Moments took my breath away. See, what she didn't know and what Stefan didn't know was as I was going through feeling completely overwhelmed by life. Overcommitted, serious writer's block, and I was ready to pull the plug on writing those morning reflections. God spoke through Heidi. Moments, right? Moments. And, there was another incident that happened when I was here. First, I want to say, I want to welcome the newcomers. I think there was like maybe 10 of you or so, and home isn't just where you live. Home is where they understand you. Welcome home, And there's a lovely line in the third edition in one of the stories that says, it can't promise to open the gates of heaven and let you in, but we can open the gates of hell and let you out. Right? I just love that. If you're sitting there, you're new, you don't ever have to be alone ever again. You don't ever have to pick up a drink or a drug ever again. All you have to do is get in the middle of this thing and sit with us. And I have a gift for all those newcomers. But there's a backstory to it. Plus, I have a gift for all the birthday people as well. So at the end, if you would like that small gift, as you hear what this is, there's a backstory to it. So about 5 years ago, Stefan calls me and he says, my best friend, who was the best man at my wedding, he's going to go down to San Clemente and get sober, going to rehab. Could you help him out? I said, of course. So I go to the rehab to pick up Mike P. And the first thing out of Mike's mouth is, look, I know I need to get sober, but I don't believe in God. You know, I was never raised with religion, don't have anything, just no God thing, right? So we were out for coffee. By the end of coffee, I had him at least be willing to be open to the new ideas, concepts, and perceptions of life. And you know the story. So he goes to a lot of meetings. He starts hearing these stories. These miracles unfold. He starts to believe a little bit. Right? I take him through the steps. He starts to have some more spiritual experiences, especially that 4th step. You know, when we took it over to my fire pit and burned it and sent it back to hell where it belongs, right? And Mike turns to me and goes, I feel different. Spiritual experience. Fast forward, he was there for 45 days. And we're at a meeting before he's about to leave. And he's, all he's talking about is God. You know, which is making me smile. And I said, Mike, you know, about 30 days ago, Covenant offered you to get baptized and you weren't ready. Are you ready now? He goes, oh yeah, absolutely, I'm ready now. See, now I know the rules. You just have to have someone who's willing to accept God in their heart, mind, and soul. Water and somebody to facilitate it. So I looked across the room. One of my sponsees is a pastor who's baptized hundreds of people in recovery. So I waved Pastor Tom over. I said, Tom, come here. And we grabbed a couple people. We went outside this church in this little courtyard. We did a prayer circle around Mike. Pastor Tom did his thing, and Mike accepted God into his heart. As we're walking back into the meeting, Mike turns to me and says, you know, I feel like I'm walking on air. I say, yeah, Mike, you are. You're having a spiritual experience. So 2 weeks later, I ended up being here, booked to speak. And Mike is in the front row with his wife, Lynette, and Morgan, his daughter. Is Morgan here? No, she's not here. That's too bad. So they're in the front row, and part of my pitch, I always try to include my struggle with God and spirituality. You know, I was raised Catholic, went to Catholic school, was an altar boy. I could say Mass by heart, but I couldn't go that longest mile from my mind to my heart. And then you come into the program and they say, turn it over to God. And that just didn't connect with me. So what I started doing in early sobriety was I made this nebulous God that I didn't quite understand tangible. I made him real. So I started doing little things like strapping in the passenger seat. By the way, 37 years later, I still do all these things today. You go out to my car, passenger seat strapped in. When I walk into a room, I close my eyes and say, after you. You know, one of the things I do is I cup my hands and I close my eyes and I picture all of life's stressors, money, relationships, conflict with people, health issues, whatever, and I lift it up to God. I physically give it to God. One of the other things that I do that I hope you now start to do is whenever and I also put a chair behind me so God has my back. But there's room for both God and this gentleman here. As a matter of fact, you know, when I was here last, I honestly felt God in this room. And I again feel it today. God is in every single one of these seats out here. So getting back to whenever I find change on the ground, I pick it up and I thank God for my sobriety and everything that I have today. If you do that, you're going to find change at the strangest places at just the right time. Anyway, so I told that story. Go through my pitch, go home. A couple days later, Mike calls me and he says, you're not going to believe this. Morgan, his teenage daughter, who'd never had religion in her life, didn't believe in God, was walking down the street and found a penny with a cross in it. She took that penny home with tears in her eyes and said, Dad, I think I want to go to church. As a family, they started to go to church. From what I understand, she still has a Bible in her car. So, here's the gift to the newcomers and the birthday people. I found a place where they actually have those pennies with the crosses in them, and I got a whole bunch of them. So after the meeting, come on up and get a little token of hope, faith, and spiritual courage from my heart to yours. I better get to it because I'm definitely going to run out of time, like I always do. There was a young lady with a daughter, son, baby, daughter, beautiful daughter. I just couldn't get over the guy. He was just eating like every cookie in the place. It was funny, and then he blamed her. In early sobriety, I heard the best definition of an alcoholic that I've ever heard. There was a single father that used to bring his young son to meetings. And this guy had about 15, 16, 17 years, something like that. This kid was no more than 4 or 5. So this kid only knew a sober dad, and he grew up in the rooms of AA. So at the break, I'm going to get a cup of coffee, and there's this little kid standing there, snatching cookies. And I looked down at this kid, and I said, you know what's going on here? He goes, yeah, this is Alcoholics Anonymous. I said, okay, what's an alcoholic? And this little kid looks up at me and says, an alcoholic is somebody who laughs and smiles a lot and doesn't drink alcohol. So if it's okay with you guys, we're going to laugh and smile a lot and not drink alcohol, okay? All right, let's get to it a little bit. So I was born and raised in Venice, where the debris meets the sea. Some of you might be familiar with that haven of debauchery. I grew up really fast. I was one of 4 illegitimate children. We all had different fathers. We had different colored hair. We were quite the genetic cesspool. I looked up my family tree. There were 2 dogs pissing on it. They took away my water, too. Thank you. I grew up in a really bad neighborhood. Thank you. It was called my family. I promised Terry a funny Catholic story, so here we go. So, when I had about 2 years sobriety, I finally had enough courage to ask my mom who my biological father was, and she says, you better sit down. So I'm sitting there, and she goes, your dad was a Catholic priest. Now, I was raised Catholic. I know I wasn't supposed to happen. And she's looking at me with this mortified look on her face, waiting for me to say something. I couldn't possibly tell her what I was thinking, because what I was thinking was, Mom, you've been a very naughty girl. I was suddenly like in an episode of Maury with the DNA results. Father, you are the father, right? Yeah. My birth certificate was an apology letter from a condom company. So we didn't have we didn't have fathers. We struggled. We were very, very poor. In my mind, the poorest of the poor, and there were a lot of insecurities behind that. Just always having ratty clothes, always moving, never having a car. We never had a car. Holes in my shoes, food stamps, the whole 9 yards, and that just like that reinforced my less than already that I had, right? And I think we were so poor, we went to KFC to lick other people's fingers, right? Being red hair and freckles, I was different. I was the only redhead in the family. I was the only redhead in the neighborhood, and if you're different, you get picked on. So I got picked on a lot when I was a kid. I wasn't always 6'5". I was little and then had growth spurt. But, don't feel too sorry for me. I did have about 25 girlfriends in grammar school and junior high. Unfortunately, none of them knew it. If I'm going to be rigorously honest, my first girlfriend was a magazine. You know how to start an argument with a ginger? Say something. Arguing with a ginger is like baptizing a cat. It sounds like a great idea until that cat scratches the hell out of you, right? We grew up in total filth as well. My mom was a borderline hoarder, and my sister was a hoarder. Just filth, and so bad that I was embarrassed. I would never even bring any friends home. I was afraid they might stick to something, right? It was embarrassing. You know what else was going on there, which was a lot of our story, is a lot of emotional and physical abuse. So here I am, like this broken child, getting yelled at and beaten all the time, right? And the impression I got was, you're unwanted and you're unloved. You know, and I started getting involved in criminal activity at a very young age, started getting in a lot of fights, wonder where I got that behavior from. When I was about 13, my mom came at me to start beating on me again, and by that time I did have a growth spurt, became an athlete, and was this street fighter. And I said, don't even think about it. And she knew that if she took one more step, it was going to be on. So the beating stopped for my brothers and my sisters and myself. But what also stopped was whatever parenting we had, what little parenting we had also stopped. I could act with impunity. I could do whatever I wanted. And I just became this little scamming street thug criminal at 13. At 14, that's when I crossed that invisible line. I had been drinking and using pretty consistently from the age of 12, but 14, I was drinking some beers with some friends, picked up the phone, called her, and her was this girl that I had this serious crush on. Asked her out, she said yes. That was it, man. Liquid courage, social lubricant, the missing ingredient in life. Man, I had found it. You know, that's when I heard the bells and the whistles, man. That was it. Saw the rainbows and the unicorns. You know, I like that in the book it says, alcohol, in the 3rd edition, alcohol gave me wings to fly, but it took away the sky. Doesn't that describe our journeys, right? You know, and we all have that moment where we cross that invisible line, where we realize we're 3 drinks shy of comfortable. You know, that was my moment. When I was 15, I started working at a liquor store. Everyone that worked there were alcoholics. We had mixed drinks in the back all the time. We just drank our entire shifts. Half the people were dealers, so I had access to other dried goods and produce. This isn't Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and I do believe in singleness of purpose, but I will tell you this. I did do cocaine and Quaaludes once for 10 years. I got to go on the record and say I hated cocaine. I just liked the way it smelled, right? Cocaine has got to be the most insidious drug out there. If you do too much of it, it makes you horny beyond belief, but then it won't let you do anything about it. We get chronic sleepy pee-pee, if you know what I mean. Oh, boy. Let's get back to my first love, drinking. So when I was 18, moved out, and they also gave me the keys to that store. Became night manager. So it was on, man. I could just drink. And run out of alcohol 2, 3, and 4 in the morning. You know, let's just go down the store, stock up, fill the box of alcohol, keep that party going 24/7. By the time I was 19, I already was a daily drinker, knew I was an alcoholic. The group that I hung out with, we were kind of functioning alcoholics. You know, there's like fun and fun with consequences, and then just consequences. At that time, it was mostly fun and a few consequences. We were kind of rationalized our drinking. You know, we were living on our own. We were making our own money, not always legally. We had girlfriends. We were in school. We were athletes, right? We were rationalizing our drinking, but we were passing out every night, right, and blacking out, and doing all kinds of other stuff. You know what's we even had nicknames like Grass and Zigzag. Get this, my nickname was FedEx. You know why? Because if I went to party at your house, I would absolutely positively be there overnight. You know, we would joke about it. You know, better a bottle in front of me than a frontal lobotomy. Drink triple, C double, act single. You know, that kind of stuff. But you know, it's all of those guys are dead. By the way, I'm the only one living. 2 of them were I consider my best friends, and they were in and out of the program for 25 years, and jail's institution, and that final payment, death. And I got to see how bad my life would have been had I gone down that route. Another guy died of a heart attack at 52, but he couldn't stop doing coke, so I have a feeling that was probably related to that. You know, the other guy had 20 years of sobriety. He started drinking again, got cancer, stopped drinking, you know, and I buried him last December. You know, and I had the opportunity because I'm here, I'm present. You know, I have a life now. I was able to go up to Seattle and spend a week with him. You know, he was dying. He was terminally ill. And I got to spend the week with him. And the last thing that I said to him before I left was, I love you. And he said, I love you back. A couple days later, he was gone. So where I'm going with that is I hope that you guys use that liberally. Tell people you love them. Because you never know when it's going to happen. You know? And I don't even know you, but I love you guys. You know? You're my people. When I was 22, that's when the wheels started falling off. There was this girl I'd been dating from 16 to 22 and caught her cheating several times. And it broke me. You know, I had no self-esteem. All my self-esteem was wrapped up in her, and yeah, I just fell apart. And we tried to make it work, but it just didn't work. Once trust is broken, it's really hard to get it back. And I didn't want to feel those emotions, man. I wanted to numb out. We know how to get there. So the next year was almost like, there was a blur, just one long blackout. But that's really when the consequences started. You know, the arrests and the crashing of the cars and the coming to and the emergency rooms and just falling apart. And one of the guys I went to high school with was actually in the program. And at 23, I tried the program for the first time. But I went in with the world's worst attitude. You know, I was looking for the differences, not the similarities. You know, so I related to nothing, as opposed to now I look for the similarities, and I relate to every single person that I hear share, right? Also this God thing, right? Raised Catholic. In my mind, God was just keeping score, and he was going to punish me for my sins, and I was going to hell by the time I was 12. You know what I mean? Why bother? You know, that was the God that I believed in. And so when you said God, I heard Catholicism. When you had said spirituality, I heard Catholicism. But what I later learned is that when I started out my journey in faith, as a little tiny kid, and, you know, going to CCD and Catholic school, I learned about God as a child. And a child's perception of everything is fear-based. So my child's perception of God was fear-based. So what I knew when I came in here, I needed to get a God of my own understanding, an adult perception of God. And I love that we get to do that. We get to God of our... And you know what else helped me is there was a gentleman that spoke in early sobriety for me, and he said, religion is for people who are afraid to go to hell. Spirituality is for people that have been there. You know, and I couldn't wrap my head around this God spirituality thing, but, you know, I knew that hell thing because I had lived that hell. The other part was the nature of the disease. You know, all I heard at that time was, you can't drink forever. It's so funny how we filter out the most important part of that. The most important part of that message was, one day at a time. We don't have to drink today, right now, one day at a time. So I had to go on and destroy the rest of my life, and it got bad. At 25, started... But let me just paint a picture. The blackouts were turning into 2-3 days at a time. I never knew what day it was. That was pre-cell phone days. I had to go down to paper racks to see what day it was. You know, I just never knew what day it was. You know, and you know, I love that those blackouts, we don't have to ask those 3 blackout questions. You know the ones. Where the hell am I? Who the hell are you? And who pissed in my pants? You know, and the DTs were strong, and you know, I had to drink just to stop the shakes. And you know, when I was working at the store, and people used to come in first thing in the morning to get that generic vodka and that Old English 840s, I used to kind of make fun of them in my head. You know, I used to say, that'll never be me. Well, that was me. I became that person. That morning walk of shame, you know, with this handful of change just to get generic vodka. That I wasn't even getting drunk anymore. I was just balancing out just to stop the shakes. You know, we started out as alcohol connoisseurs, and we become alcohol kind of sewers, right? You know. I lost my job, lost my apartment. I was worse than broke. I was heavily in debt. I was doing some urban camping and a lot of couch surfing. And, I was so saturated with alcohol. I was suffering from alcohol poisoning. And we process it differently. Some people throw up, whatever. I sweat. I would sweat alcohol, sweat vodka. So I was like sweating, a handle of vodka on these people's couches. I became the couch killer. Yeah, had to make some couch amends. I really did. But I think I had hit so many bottoms up to that point in time. The ones that started hitting me were the emotional and the mental bottoms that I was hitting. And I was really at that point where the alcohol psychosis was hitting. It was real. I was starting to hear things. I was starting to see things. And and I knew it wasn't real, but it felt like it was real. It's alcohol psychosis, And I love that our book talks about it. In full flight from reality, can't differentiate the true from the false. Outright mental defective, Yeah, that was me, I was 3 gallons of crazy in a 1 gallon bucket, and it was exhausting cleaning up the mess, right? And I was definitely on that bullet train to crazy town, and I had no way to get off, right? And you've all got that one-way ticket to the lunatic ball. Yeah, I was right there. But the emotional part, that's really when I hit my bottom. All those self-loathing voices in my head just would not stop. To the point where I just gave up. And I started to become obsessed with suicide. I couldn't think I could stop drinking, and I couldn't keep living the way I was living. And to me, the only way was to check out. It's ironic that, as I was planning my death, God was planning my life. And I was talking to somebody before the meeting. Had I not lived my life, I wouldn't believe it's true. Going from where I came from to the life that I had and where I am today it's remarkable. And we get to do this. There's so many miracles in this program. I love hearing the stories in this program. So there was this woman that I had been dating for some time, and she actually had been going to Al-Anon for 4 months. That's a hint. If you drive somebody to Al-Anon, you got a problem. And I figured I owed it to her to call her to say goodbye. I can't do this anymore. I'm checking out. So I got her on the phone, and I had one of the first of many, many spiritual experiences. When I got her on the phone, what came out of my mouth were those 3 magic words: I need help. At that time, I didn't know where it came from. I know now. First of many spiritual experiences. She said she'd come and pick me up. I said, hold on, I started this thing, let me finish. We'll start this thing tomorrow. Went into the freezer, got the rest of that fifth, and I was out cold. My journey started the next day. She picked me up, took me to my first couple of meetings, but she had enough program to know that I needed to do this on my own. And so she cut me loose. And I can tell you, 7 months and 3 weeks later, I married that woman. Now, I would not recommend that. 2 dinglings do not make a bell. Those 2 dead batteries were not going to start that car. Relationships, the first year of sobriety is like pouring Miracle Grow on those character defects, right? Yeah. Do you guys know what the relationship acronym is? RELATIONSHIP? Oh, you're going to love this. Really exciting love affair turns into outrageous nightmare. Sobriety hangs in peril. You're laughing because you know it's right. Yeah. They're going to have a reality show on dating the first year of sobriety. You know what they're going to call it? World's Deadliest Catch. Here's the crazy thing. 37 years later, I'm still married to that woman. She had a strong Al-Anon program. I had a strong AA program. We didn't make each other our higher powers. We made God and the program first, right? And we grew in parallel tracks. I married Mrs. Wright. I just didn't know her first name was Always. In a marriage, one person is right, the other person is the husband. There's only 2 ways to argue with a woman. Neither one works, right? This will sum up my relationship with my wife. We go to the pound, the rescue, to get a dog, and she goes by the cats, and she falls in love with this old cat that nobody wants to adopt. She wanted the cat. I didn't want the cat. So we compromised. We got the cat. Help me, Stefan. I'm stuck in a wife joke and I can't get out. you know, I'm so glad that we are laughing, you know. And my wife and I, we laugh all the time. You know, our families run on love, laughter, and strong coffee, for sure. You know, and we've laughed for 37 years. And just a couple of nights ago, she was laughing so hard, hysterically laughing, she was literally crying. Of course, it was at my expense. I give her a lot of material. But, you know, I love her more now than I've ever loved her before, because I've stayed in the middle of this program. She stayed in the middle of her program, right? We've applied the principles of the program into our relationship. You know, one of my things is here's the key to a happy relationship. Give 100% and expect nothing in return. If you can do that, you're going to have a good relationship, and you're going to like yourself. That worked so well with me with my wife. I transferred it to my workplace and then my friends, and it just works. Give 100%, expect nothing in return. And you know, I love my wife so much. You know, if I had a choice of breathing or loving her, I'd use my last breath to say I love you. That's how much I love my wife. All right, let's get back to newcomer. So, I didn't do the detox, rehab, sober living thing that a lot of people do. I did the shake and bake in the rooms, right? So I'm shaking and I'm sweating. I'm terribly insecure, so I'm afraid to talk to anybody. My teeth are messed up from neglect, so I don't want to smile. I'm wearing 70s clothes in 1986. I look like a cross between Beetlejuice and Willy Wonka. I was not a vision for you. You know, in early sobriety, there was a guy, I was sitting next to a guy, and he reaches over and he goes, "Welcome, you look like you're new." I look at him and go, "How do you know?" And you know what the guy did? He started laughing. And you know what I started doing? I started laughing. So began the healing through laughter. Laughter is the sound of recovery. Laughter is the healing music is this program that you've been playing 37 years of beautiful music for me. Right? You know, I love it on our book on page 132. It says, we absolutely insist on enjoying life. And then a little while later on it says, outsiders are shocked at the merriment we find in our tragic experiences. we laugh at everything. You know, it's like God is the greatest comedian that ever existed that plays to an audience that's too afraid to laugh. Not in here. Not in here. Laughter is God's sunshine. It's what makes everything grow, guys. So, what am I going to do here? I want to save time to let you know what happened to dear old Dad. The program's been simplified. Been simplified by the steps. Circle and the triangle, slogans and sayings and acronyms. And I'm going to touch on the steps just a little bit. You know, our founder says the sole purpose of our groups is to stay sober by teaching and practicing the 12 steps. And I firmly believe that too. But there's a disclaimer in that, and that's on page 68 in the 12 and 12. And by the way, if I ever talk about the book, I'm paraphrasing. The only step we can work with absolute perfection is step 1. The remaining 11 steps are ideals. They're goals to which we measure our progress. So the steps, you can do step 1 perfectly, don't pick up, right? But the other steps, they're goals to which we measure our progress. They're not a homework assignment. They're not a checkbox. They're not a destination. It's a journey and a process. Your ego seeks the destination. Your soul seeks the journey. You know, your ego, not your amigo. Yeah, my sponsor says the ego is the anesthetic that numbs the pain of stupidity, right? So take a walk with God. He'll meet you at the steps. And the circle and the triangle. And I wish I had more time to get into, there's so much. To me, it's the cheat sheet of AA. And there's so many threes in the program, and I think that, I don't know if they did it on purpose. One is 3 is a sacred number, but 3 is easy to remember, but whatever. There's a lot of 3s in the program. The first is the 3 legacy: unity, service, and recovery, right? And unity is we go to meetings and we fellowship. Recovery, services, we take commitments and we help others, and then recovery is the 12 steps and 12 traditions. One of the ones that my first sponsor used to pound into me was that thing that's referenced on page 98. And it says, burn the idea in the consciousness of every man that he can get well regardless of anyone. The only condition being, trust God, clean house, help others. Right? Trust God, steps 1, 2, and 3. And step 11, clean house, that's steps 4 through 10. Those are all of our spiritual blockages. And then, helping others, that's step 12, right? And our book says it over and over throughout that's the secret sauce of this thing. One alcoholic helping another alcoholic. What does it say? It says, practical experience has shown that nothing so much ensures our immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics, right? So intensive work with other alcoholics can be either you're intensively taking the steps, somebody's working through you, or you are taking somebody else through the steps, right? And I love that all the steps have promises, and some of the 12-step promises are some of my favorites. And in the Working with Others chapter, there's something that says, life will take on new meaning as we watch others recover and we see them help others, as we watch loneliness vanish and we see a whole fellowship grow up about us and we gain a whole new friends. Frequent contact with newcomers and with others will be the bright spot of our lives, right? Loneliness will vanish, right? And then there's another one on page 159 that kind of sums up my life. It says, though they knew they needed to help others to stay sober, that was transcended by the sheer happiness that they found in completely giving themselves to others. You see, I have found that the road to my happiness is paved by helping others. Whenever I want to get out of myself, I just help others. Whenever I'm in a blue mood, I just help others. It works every time. We make a living on what we get. We make a life on what we give, right? So there's so many more. The nature of the disease, the allergy of the body, obsession of the mind. Spiritual malady. Allergy of the body is, we have an allergic reaction. Once we start, we can't stop. That's an abnormal reaction. My wife, she's a normie, right? She'll order a glass of wine. She'll drink about half of it. She'll say, I'm feeling it, and she stops. Pisses me off every time. I'm pretty sure she just does it to annoy me. If I could drink normally, I'd wake up early every morning and start drinking. And the obsession of the mind, we get that. We were completely obsessed with drugs and alcohol, and then when we get in here, we get sober. Now we're obsessed with the fact that we want to drink like other people, right? We'll pursue it into the gates of insanity and death. We read it in meetings all the time. We're very obsessive people. It's like normal people have about 2,000 thoughts a day. Alcoholics, we have the same thought 2,000 times a day. Yeah. And then that spiritual malady, and that's that hole in my gut. That feeling that I never felt comfortable growing up. And first I filled it with drugs and alcohol, and that worked until I burned my life to the ground. And then I had to come in here, and that hole came back. So what was I going to fill that hole with? Well, I was going to fill it with hope and gratitude, fellowship, love, but most importantly, spirituality. And how do we get there? And there's so many ways in the program that we can get there. To me, it's like you can go to a lot of meetings and you can hear that beautiful language of the heart. You can hear God speak through others. That's a way to find faith, just listening, going to a lot of meetings, going through the steps. I've never taken anybody through the steps that hasn't had a spiritual awakening. That's the educational variety thing, And another way, which is unfortunate, but probably the biggest developer of faith in me, is when we walk through difficulties and hardships in life and we get to the other side. This too shall pass. It always does. We get to the other side. We have that aha moment, that life lesson, that spiritual experience. We build a little faith. And then another thing happens. And we go through this same process and we build a little bit more faith. And that's the only difference between me with 37 years and somebody with 37 days is I've had more sober life experiences that I have walked through, that I've had an opportunity to build this faith to the point where now I'm all in. No matter what happens, I know I'm going to be all right. I don't like it, it's interesting. It's like sometimes, and we were talking about this at dinner, sometimes God has to turn up the volume of our life in order for us to hear. You know, pain and suffering is an alcoholic's best friend. It's the only thing sharp enough to cut through our pride and our ego. Right? You know, God enters through our wounds. You know, and what I've learned in here is we don't have emotional breakdowns, we have emotional breakthroughs. You know, and tears and emotional pain, that's just fear leaving the body. You know, we complain about the obstacles in our path until we realize the obstacles are the path, right? And it is a breakthrough in life. It's an epiphany in life when you realize that life is happening. It's not happening to us, it's happening for us. You know, and it took me a while to get there. The last way to find faith is to help others. You know, I that's been my experience. You know, in early sobriety, when I was working with others, that was the closest I was getting to God. You know, there's this beautiful poem, 3-line poem by William Blake. It says, I sought my soul I could not see. I sought my God, but God eluded me. I sought my brother, and I found all three. Doesn't that describe us perfectly? Yeah. They're playing my song. My ride's here. So I don't really have time to get into too much more, but, you know, I'm just going to kind of go through it briefly. So the original circle and triangle, mind, body, and spirit, right? What do we share? Our experience, strength, and hope. How do we get sober? Honesty, openness, willingness. You know, this disease wants to kill us. It's cunning, baffling, and powerful. The first 3 steps. I can't, he can, so let him. There are so many of these 3s. Play with it. Try it. It's the AA cheat sheet. Whenever I feel squirrely, I check my circles and triangles. I can find what I'm not doing or what I should be doing right off the bat, right? I like this string of 3s. If you're feeling restless, irritable, discontent, or suffering from pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization, you may want to uncover, discover, and discard so you can be happy, joyous, and free. So I don't want to run out of time, and I don't want to leave you hanging with dear old dad. So I called the Catholic Church to find out about my dad, and unfortunately he had passed away 3 months earlier. But they connected me with a couple of priests that he had worked with, and the first one was out in a place called the San Fernando Mission, and I called him up, and he wasn't believing anything that I had to say, but he agreed to meet with me. So I go out to the mission, and I walk through the door, and I'm in the doorway. He takes one look at me, his jaw dropped. He goes, "You're his son." So now I knew what the dude looked like. You know, 6'5", 190 pounds, and ginger loving. So he told me about my father, that he was born and raised in Ireland. You know, he played professional rugby before he went to the seminary. You know, very outgoing guy. Gave inspirational sermons, packed the church, you know. But he was an alcoholic. A lot of similarities. The next guy, he had a different perspective. He had left the priesthood later on in life and got married and had a couple of kids. And we spoke for hours. And as he's telling me about my dad, I'm telling him about myself. And at the end of it, he looks at me and goes, "You know, it's too bad your dad didn't get to meet you, because if he would have been really proud of you." You see, that's all a son wants to hear from a father is, "I'm proud of you." So I got to close that chapter of my life. So I thought. Fast forward 25 years, I moved from LA to San Clemente. I tell that story. I'm speaking on Friday night. I tell that story. A couple of days later, at a meeting I've been going to for 6 months, sitting in the same kind of general area next to this older Irish gentleman named Charlie. Before the meeting, Charlie leans over to me and he says, "Mike, I really enjoyed your pitch. By the way, what was your father's name?" And I told him my father's name. He said, "Oh my God, I knew him in Ireland." They grew up together. They played professional rugby together. They were so close that my dad helped him immigrate to the United States. And Charlie was there in 1947 at this church in South Pasadena when my dad gave his first Mass, and that's when you become an ordained priest, and they gave this commemorative card. And Charlie reaches into his pocket and he says, "You know, I've been saving this for 65 years, but I think it belongs to you." Is it odd or is it God? You know what I mean? How can you line all that up, right? It's incredible. You know, and he had pictures of my father, and he had that one answer that I didn't know. Did he ever get sober? He got sober at the end of his life, right? So here's the Holy Grail. We get to define a higher power of our own understanding, but we don't have to stop there. We can define a spiritual experience of our own understanding. And I hope that you don't set the bar so high. Don't wait for the burning bush or the room to fill with white light. Those things happen, but they're few and far between. Our book in the Spiritual Experience Appendix talks about it as a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism. If you get in the middle of this thing, you're going to change. You're going to have a personality change, and by definition, a spiritual experience. And what is the 12th step? Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. Right? I've never seen anyone actually honestly apply themselves to those steps and not have a spiritual awakening. But to me, it's so much more. It's anything that changes my attitude and my perspective in a positive way. It's that time when I said those 3 magic words, I need help. Or hear a small child describe an alcoholic as somebody who laughs and smiles a lot and doesn't drink alcohol. Or we baptize a guy outside a meeting and he feels physically lighter. Or someone finds a penny on the ground with a cross in it and it completely changes their life. Or we do a 4-step and we feel physically lighter and more part of this program. Or that moment when, we do our last amends. When I did my last amends, I broke down. It took a long time, 5 years, because there was a lot of money that I had to pay back. But I literally broke down crying. And I couldn't understand where it was coming from. Where it was coming from as I realized I no longer had that guilt and that shame. I could forgive myself. I could finally forgive myself, right? Spiritual experience. It's the moments when you realize that you're enough and that you accept yourself, faults and all. Because if we truly accept ourselves, we're no longer crucified by the burden of needing other people to accept us. And that is an amazing freedom. And that's what we get here. It's a spiritual experience if you allow it to be a spiritual experience, and no one can take that away from you. I used to believe that we're human beings having a spiritual experience. Now I believe we're spiritual beings having a human experience. I do it so often in life that I now believe that life itself is a spiritual experience. All I have to do is open my heart and my mind to those possibilities, right? It could be a beautiful sunset, a beautiful sunrise, birth of a child. Hearing I love you, mommy, or I love you, daddy. Or hearing a child's laughter, especially your own. I think everybody's ringtone should be a child's laughter. Wouldn't that make the world a better place? It's those tears of joy or extreme moments of gratitude, or those coincidences that feel like God shots. You know what I'm talking about, right? One of my favorites, and we were talking about this at dinner, is like when life is unfolding before you, you can take a step back and you can say these simple words, I almost missed this. I've been so blessed to be able to say that so many times throughout my sober 37 years. This is a gift. This is an amazing gift. God's greatest gift to us is unconditional love. His greatest promise is unlimited potential. It's never too late to be what you might have been. And I love that in this program, that we get a whole life do-over. We get a second chance. We get to live more than one life in one lifetime, right? And I hope that when you're on that journey that you try to be somebody that makes other people feel like they're somebody. And don't listen to the self-doubts. I call that untie the knots. You know the knots. The can nots, the am nots, the do nots, the shall nots, the have nots, the could nots, the would nots, the should nots. Don't let people should all over you, right? I used to have a coach in high school, and he would say, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Life becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. What we think upon grows. You can't possibly have a positive life with a negative mind. If you're thinking going down that dark road, change the station. Live in gratitude, right? It's as simple as that, and I love what Gretzky said, one of the greatest hockey players ever. He says, 100% of the shots you don't take, miss. Take your shot. You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. And I love there's St. Francis once said, first we do what's necessary. It's kind of an analogy to the program. First we do what's necessary, then we do what's possible, and then we can achieve the impossible. What's necessary is we get clean and sober. We come into the program, we uncover, discover, and discard. We work these things out. We dump all this baggage. We clear away the spiritual blockages. We become of service. We start helping others. That's what we do. That's what's necessary. What's possible is we get to go back to school, get degrees, we get new trades. We get our jobs back, or we get new jobs or new careers. We start businesses. We get our relationships back. We get our families back, or we build new healthy relationships. We become productive members of society. We actually become pillars in our own families. It's so funny how they didn't trust us with anything. They'd see you walk into the room and they hide their purse. And then now they're saying, will you execute my will? You know what I mean? It's amazing, how we transform in this program. So what's impossible? What's impossible is whatever you can dream. Whatever you can dream. And make your dreams bigger than your fears. And know that God did not put those dreams in your heart if He didn't give you everything that you needed to achieve those dreams. And I would caution you, play in the field of dreams, but let God keep score. We put in the work. We stay out of the results outcome business. I tell my sponsees, you can't lock yourself in a closet and expect God to jam a hot dog through the keyhole to feed you. It doesn't work that way. If you pray for God to move a mountain, you know what's going to happen? You're going to wake up next to a shovel. Yeah. So we do the work, right? And I can tell you that I've had an opportunity to live all my dreams. If I die tomorrow, I die a happy man. And my wife doesn't like me saying that, but I know that God has more for me, but I just have had this incredible life. I did go back to school. I got my bachelor's degree. I even bless you, and I even swam in college and became an All-American swimmer as an older drunk, which is crazy in itself. That's a whole other story for a whole other day. I went on to get my master's degree, and I did really well. And that might not be a big thing for a lot of people, but for a guy that was going through alcohol psychosis that thought he totally lost his mind, when you graduate with honors, that's a big deal. It was a big deal to me, right? I excelled in my career. I reached the pinnacle of my profession. I was a very high-ranking chief officer of one of the largest fire departments in the United States. How do I get from that to this, right? And I did find love. And I was able to raise, 2 adult children in a very loving 12-step home. And they never saw their dad drink. But the one dream that I never thought was possible was that I would be able to quiet my mind and my heart. Quiet mind, peaceful heart. Never thought that was possible. Never thought I could turn the chaos off of the alcoholic brain. But what you guys did was you all allowed me to slow my life down, that I could get to that place where I could have a quiet mind and a peaceful heart. I could have lasting contentment. I'm off the roller coaster. So I'm going to close with this. That's like the biggest lie in LA. Where somebody says I'm going to close with this, they go on for 5 minutes. I'm going to close with this. I opened 2 gifts from God this morning in my eyes. Today I love life. I love this program. And I love all of you. I just think I almost missed this. Thanks.